we've got this incredibly detailed plan in front of us. It's really a blueprint called A Decade for Global Climate Restoration. So our mission today is to sort of walk through this blueprint with you. It's pretty comprehensive interdisciplinary stuff. We want to unpack what this emergency actually means for the planet and, crucially, what concrete actions are being proposed. It's about getting really informed, but hopefully without feeling totally snowed under, because honestly, the scale of it all, it's immense, both the challenge and the proposed solutions.
It really is. And what's truly striking, I think, is just the raw urgency. I mean, look at 2024. It wasn't just the warmest year on record, it smashed the previous records. We're talking 1.46 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels.
Yeah.
And here's the real kicker.
Yeah.
All 10 of the warmest years in the entire historical record, they've all happened in the last decade. 2015 to 2024. Think about that. A decade ago, this felt like, a future issue. Now, well, the future's definitely here, staring us right in the face with this heat. It's a massive red alert for the planet.
Okay, a red alert. So when the report uses that kind of language, what does it actually look like? I mean, what are the key signs, the indicators showing things are escalating so fast?
Yeah.
Well, first, the overall warming trend. The planet's average temperature is up about 2 degrees Fahrenheit. That's roughly 1.1 Celsius since 1850. But the rate of warming is what's really alarming. Since 1982, it's more than tripled. We're seeing about 0.36 degrees Fahrenheit or 0.2 Celsius increase per decade now. And then there are the oceans. 2024 saw record high heat content in the upper layers. Remember, the oceans soak up something like 90% of the Earth's excess heat.
90%. Well,
Exactly. And that massive heat absorption, it's already triggering these unprecedented warming events, hitting places like the Southwest Pacific particularly hard, vulnerable island nations.
right. So given that urgency, what does this blueprint point to as the main causes, the undeniable drivers, as they put it?
Oh, it's crystal clear. Human activities. That's the undeniable cause. Fossil fuel use is the big one. In 2019, it accounted for roughly 79% of global greenhouse gas emissions. That's about 11 billion metric tons of carbon pumped into the atmosphere every year.
11 billion tons annually,
Yeah.
just from fossil fuels.
It's from fossil fuels. And then you add things like unsustainable land management, deforestation, clearing land for agriculture. Those are major contributors, too. And it's not just one thing, right? It's these compounding crises. Our consumer culture, the global economy's dependence on fossil fuels for shipping everything everywhere, plus the huge energy demands of modern tech, cloud computing, AI, all the streaming we do, it all digs the ditch deeper, embedding these emissions into, well, everything.
Which leads us to this 10-year window the report keeps stressing. It sounds like it's not just about things adding up, but about hitting certain tipping points, critical thresholds.
Precisely. That's the really critical part. Even if every country follows through on its current climate policies, we're still projected to hit about 3.2 degrees Celsius of warming by 2100, which is catastrophic.
3.2.
Yeah. And the IPCC, the big climate science body, they say 1.5 degrees of warming is basically already baked in because of past emissions. We're likely to hit that mark as early as the 2030s. And here's the really crucial thing. Whether we're aiming for that 1.5 degree target or the slightly less ambitious 2 degree target, both require the same radical acceleration of effort, like right now, in the next 3 to 7 years.
3 to 7 years for that kind of radical shift.
It's an enormous push, and it has to start immediately. We're also dealing with these dangerous feedback loops. Higher temperatures mess with the water cycle, more intense rain, more soil erosion. And then land degradation, deforestation, wildfires, thawing permafrost releases more greenhouse gases. It feeds on itself, making everything worse, faster.
So this critical 10-year window,
Yeah.
what does it mean practically? It's not like we can reverse everything in 10 years, right? It's more about hitting certain critical, irreversible milestones.
Exactly that. It's about locking in progress that can't be easily undone, setting a new trajectory.
Okay, that's a stark picture of the challenge. So let's pivot to the solutions. The report lays out these pillars of transformation. The first one is this accelerated energy transition. And this is where things get really interesting, right?
Absolutely. It's maybe the most dynamic area. What's truly game-changing isn't just that renewables are cleaner, it's that they've become so incredibly cheap. Take solar power. The cost of electricity from solar panels just plummeted down 85% between 2010 and 2020.
85%.
Incredible, isn't it? And wind power costs fell dramatically too, like 50–60%. So the bottom line is renewables are now the most economical choice for new electricity generation in most places. The target they set is ambitious, sure, but seemingly achievable. 65% of the world's total electricity from renewables by 2030.
65% by 2030. That's soon.
It is. It means nearly tripling global renewable capacity to 11,000 gigawatts by then. And solar PV, solar panels basically, are expected to drive about 80% of that massive growth.
Those numbers are huge. But producing all that renewable power is one thing. Getting it to where it needs to go, the grid must be a major challenge.
Oh, absolutely. That's where grid modernization is essential. We can't just plug all these renewables into the old system. It means modernizing and expanding grids globally. We're talking smart grids, advanced energy storage, using IoT devices to manage everything efficiently. The target: build and modernize 25 million kilometers of electricity grids by 2030.
25 million kilometers.
It's a massive infrastructure project, and hand in hand with that is scaling up energy storage. Batteries, pumped hydro, maybe hydrogen down the line. Storage is absolutely indispensable for dealing with the fact that the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. It smooths things out, ensures reliability.
Makes sense.
Oh,
Okay, next pillar. Decarbonizing heavy industries. Steel, cement, chemicals. These are always mentioned as the really tough ones, the hard-to-abate sectors. How does the blueprint tackle them?
yeah, they are tough nuts to crack, definitely. But the plan outlines a multi-pronged strategy. It's really a systemic redesign. First, fuel switching, moving away from coal and gas towards things like green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, or sustainable biomass. Then, totally new processes. Like, for steel, there's work on innovative electrolysis methods that avoid CO2 altogether. Carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration, CCUS, is also part of the mix. It's controversial for some, but the projections see big investment, like $80 billion over 5 years, and capacity quadrupling by 2030.
CCUS.
Okay, and there's more. Things like industrial symbiosis, where one factory's waste becomes another's raw material, plus just basic material and energy efficiency improvements. And retiring or retrofitting the oldest, dirtiest plants, it's really pushing industry towards circular economy thinking.
Okay, let's unpack that then. Sustainable resource management and circularity. This sounds like more than just better recycling, right? It feels like a fundamental shift in how we use stuff.
Right. It absolutely is. It's moving away from that linear take, make, dispose model that we're so used to. The whole idea is to design out waste and pollution from the start, keep products and materials cycling around at their highest possible value for as long as possible, and importantly, help regenerate natural systems in the process.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. Think about fashion brands taking back old clothes for recycling or resale. Or electronics designed in modules so they're easier to repair and upgrade. Or business models shifting to product as a service. You lease the function, like lighting or mobility, instead of owning the physical product. On the waste side, it's simple things too. Cutting food waste, buying used items, sharing or borrowing things instead of everyone owning one. And then you have the advanced tech, chemical, biological, mechanical recycling that can handle more complex materials. Plus waste to energy, like gasification or anaerobic digestion, turning unavoidable waste into power.
Right, closing the loop. And what about water? The report mentions transforming wastewater treatment. How does that fit in?
Yes, that's key too. There are innovations like advanced biological treatments and filtration using things like membrane bioreactors that can even pull out microplastics.
Microplastics.
Wow. But it's also crucially about resource recovery. Wastewater isn't just waste, it contains resources. So capturing biogas from the organic matter to generate renewable energy, or processing the sludge into nutrient-rich fertilizers for agriculture, it creates these win-win situations. Think about aluminum recycling. It saves 95% of the energy compared to making new aluminum from ore. It connects waste reduction directly to saving energy and resources. It's all interconnected.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. The final pillar mentioned is nature-based solutions. This sounds like, well, working with nature instead of just trying to engineer fixes.
Precisely. And the potential here is huge. Nature-based solutions could deliver up to 37% more than a third of the emission cuts needed by 2030 to stay below 2 degrees Celsius warming.
37%, that's massive.
It really is. A big part of this is regenerative agriculture. It's a whole approach focused on rebuilding soil health. Healthy soil acts like a sponge for carbon, pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere. Estimates are it could sequester maybe 15 to 23 gigatons by 2050. Plus, it improves the water cycle, makes farms more resilient to drought and flood.
How does it work? What are the practices?
Key things are like minimizing plowing or tilling, using cover crops to protect bare soil, integrating livestock grazing smartly, using compost, and generally boosting biodiversity on the farm.
Got it. And forests, of course, they always come up.
Absolutely central. Reforestation, planting trees where they used to be. Afforestation, planting them where they weren't recently, and restoring degraded forests. These efforts directly remove carbon as the trees grow, storing it in wood and soil. There are big global commitments like the Bond Challenge, aiming to restore hundreds of millions, potentially up to 1 billion hectares of degraded land by 2040. Just forests alone could potentially soak up over a gigaton of CO2 equivalent per year by 2030. And then there's blue carbon. This is about restoring coastal ecosystems, mangroves, seagrass meadows, salt marshes. These coastal habitats are incredibly effective at sequestering carbon, actually storing more than half the carbon that cycles through the oceans globally.
I didn't realize they were that powerful.
They really are. And this highlights what the report calls the co-benefits multiplier effect. You invest in restoring mangroves, say, and you get carbon storage, plus storm protection for coastlines, plus nurseries for fisheries, multiple wins from one action. It all comes back to understanding things like soil health not just as dirt, but as a living ecosystem that's vital for climate mitigation and resilience.
Okay, these pillars, energy, industry, resources, nature, they lay out a really bold path. But they won't happen on their own. They need support structures, right? The report calls them enabling frameworks. Let's start with policy and governance. What's needed there?
Right. Policy is fundamental. International cooperation is the bedrock. Things like the Paris Agreement, where countries submit their climate targets, their NDCs, nationally determined contributions. Then at the national level, you need strong climate action plans and, importantly, economic incentives. A big example recently is the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA. It mobilized something like $370 billion for clean energy and has already spurred over $350 billion in actual project investments. That shows what targeted policy can do.
So government action is key. What about things like carbon pricing?
Yes, carbon pricing, either through a carbon tax or a cap-and-trade system, is another key tool. It puts a cost on pollution, which incentivizes businesses and individuals to reduce emissions. And the revenue generated can be used to fund climate solutions or help cushion the impact on households. Carbon markets also play a role, allowing companies to trade emission allowances or invest in projects like reforestation to offset their impact.
That brings up technology. You mentioned some innovations already, but how critical is ongoing tech development for hitting these goals? And what's on the horizon?
Oh, it's absolutely critical. Technology is a major catalyst. We talked about renewables, but there's also direct air capture, DAC. That's technology designed to literally suck CO2 out of the ambient air.
Pulling CO2 right out of the air.
Exactly. It's still relatively new and expensive, but the market is projected to grow incredibly fast, from around $130 million now to maybe $7 billion by 2035. There's also BECCS bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. That involves burning biomass for energy but capturing the resulting CO2. And in agriculture, we're seeing AI, robotics, IoT being used for precision farming, using water and fertilizer much more efficiently, and things like vertical farming. Plus, the advanced waste treatment tech we mentioned and better pollution controls, which are vital for health too. Air pollution killed over 8 million people globally in 2021.
That's a shocking number.
It is. Now, deploying all this tech isn't easy, right? There are challenges, high upfront costs, needing the right regulations in place, but the potential impact is enormous.
Okay, so policy and tech are crucial. But then there's the money. Mobilizing finance seems like maybe the biggest piece of the puzzle. How much are we talking about, and where does it need to come from?
It is. Yeah, it's huge. An unprecedented scale, really. We need massive investment in both mitigation cutting emissions and adaptation coping with the impacts we can no longer avoid. Developed countries have a key role here, supporting vulnerable nations. You have mechanisms like the Green Climate Fund. It's mobilized over $10 billion so far, and the new Loss and Damage Fund specifically for impacts. But public money alone won't cut it. Public-private partnerships are absolutely essential to reach the scale needed.
And where's the biggest gap right now?
The big challenge is getting investment flowing to emerging and developing economies, the EMDEs. That's where most future energy demand growth will happen. Yet, currently, something like 85% of clean energy investment goes to just China, Europe, and the USA. That imbalance has to change.
So it's about fairness, but also just practicality if that's where the growth is.
Exactly. And this brings us to the pure economics of it, the economic imperative, as the report puts it. Letting warming hit 3 degrees Celsius could slash global economic output by anywhere from 15% to 34% cumulatively. That's devastating. Whereas investing maybe 1% to 2% of global GDP annually could limit warming to 2 degrees, reducing the damages to just 2% to 4% of GDP.
So the cost of inaction is vastly higher than the cost of action.
Overwhelmingly so.
Mhm.
By potentially 11% to 27% of GDP. The economic argument for acting decisively and acting now is crystal clear. It's not a cost. It's an investment with huge returns.
Okay, the final enabling framework.
Yeah.
Societal engagement. It often feels like individual actions are just a drop in the ocean. How much do they really matter according to this blueprint?
They matter significantly, actually. Public awareness and education are vital first steps, focusing not just on the doom and gloom, but on the positive solutions. Using social media effectively to reach people, and promoting sustainable consumption is fundamental. That means encouraging behavioral shifts, individuals choosing energy-efficient appliances, cutting down on single-use plastics, opting for public transport or cycling.
So individual choices do add up.
They do. And then there's citizen science, which is a really powerful tool. Getting ordinary people involved in monitoring local environments, collecting data, it builds understanding, a sense of ownership and responsibility. But it's not just about individual acts in isolation. It's about the power of collective shifts in behavior, leveraging insights from behavioral science to nudge whole communities and societies towards more sustainable patterns. That collective action can be truly transformative.
Right. So we had these ambitious pillars, these supporting frameworks. This sounds like an incredible plan, but let's be realistic. Implementing something this massive must face huge challenges. What are the main roadblocks?
Oh, definitely. There are significant barriers. First, political will and tricky geopolitical dynamics. Efforts can be fragmented. You see that north-south divide in climate negotiations sometimes. And sadly, misinformation campaigns actively work to slow things down. Then there are capacity gaps. Many countries, especially developing ones, lack the financial resources, the technical expertise, or even the trained personnel to implement these big changes. Plus, they often face competing, more immediate priorities, poverty, health crises that demand attention.
Understandable.
And then you have the entrenched economic interests. The global economy is still deeply reliant on fossil fuels, with subsidies propping them up. Shifting away means disrupting established supply chains and industries. This is where the just transition piece is so critical. We need to make sure that workers and communities who depend on fossil fuel industries aren't just left behind. That requires planning, support, retraining. It's complex.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What other cross-cutting issues come up?
Well, building on the just transition, there's the broader issue of equity and justice. Climate change hits vulnerable populations, hardest low-income communities, indigenous peoples, people in developing nations. Yet, as we said, investment often flows elsewhere. Rectifying that imbalance, ensuring climate action is fair and equitable, is absolutely essential. And finally, there's the need for robust monitoring, reporting, and verification MRV systems. Basically, ways to track progress accurately and transparently.
To make sure countries are actually doing what they say they'll do.
Exactly. It's crucial for accountability. The Paris Agreement has this ratcheting up mechanism where countries are supposed to increase their ambition over time. That only works if you can trust the data. Tools like the Carbon Benefit Project help track the impact of things like sustainable land management. Transparency builds trust and keeps the pressure on.
Okay, so wrapping this up, the scale of the crisis is immense, but the response outlined here is equally ambitious. And that 10-year window to 2035, it's not about solving everything, is it? It's more about hitting those critical, irreversible milestones.
That's the core message, I think. It's about using this next decade to fundamentally shift our trajectory. It requires, really, a simultaneous, integrated global mobilization. Every sector, every country pulling in the same direction. The blueprint for how to do it is becoming clearer and clearer. And as we've discussed, the economic case for acting now, for making these investments, is just overwhelmingly strong. The cost of doing nothing is far, far greater.
So a final thought for everyone listening. Given the scale of this decade of decisive action, this global mobilization that's needed, what specific area, maybe in your own life or your community or your work, what part of this challenge do you feel most called to maybe explore further or even contribute to? Something to think about as we navigate this critical time together.